99.9 KTDY, the best variety of the 80s, 90s, and today. Gavin DeGraw, I don't want to be. That's a great song. Sometimes, because I got to tell you, sometimes I just don't want to be. Doc, are you like that?
Sometimes
you just want to, you don't want to be. You just don't want to be.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I tell people, be you, but sometimes you don't want to be you. Sometimes you just don't want to be. And you know what? If this is one of those days, you just have at it. Don't you be nothing. You don't want to be nothing today, don't be nothing. Just be nothing. Somebody call you on the phone and say, what you doing? What you be? Just say, I be nothing. I am nothing today. And I'm enjoying it. But tell them that. Say, I am enjoying being nothing today. All right, at 8:14, Doc's in. It's Wellness Wednesday on KTDY. It's Dr. Kevin. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys? So I made it in. I was sitting outside watching you guys through the glass like always before I come in thinking, okay, well, let's see it. It's almost time for you to go. Should I go to the bathroom or should I hold it? Should I go to the bathroom or should I hold it? So then I wait and wait, and then I go, okay, I got to go before I go in. And I look up and you call me in. So I was like,
I know. I said, like, where are you going? I'm like, through the window. Where are you going? Now it's time for you to be in here. And he says, I have to go to the bathroom. So I said, well,
everybody has to.
So I said, well, I guess we'll play another song.
right.
Okay.
So,
but we didn't want to have, an emergency up in here. Okay, what's going on? What you talking about, Chief?
Well, today I have some really interesting things that are happening in the food industry that are lovely Washington politicians are letting happen. And the truth is that it could dramatically affect you and your family's health in the future. So I wanted to talk something about that. I think people will be surprised. And what it is, there's a really big effort right now to try to avoid truth in food labeling laws. So
what you're saying is people are trying to find a loophole to break the law.
Well, they're trying to lobby the politicians to change the laws.
Okay.
So to limit what can be put on packages to tell you what's in a food and where it came from. So, in other words, whether you want to eat an entirely organic diet or not, that's kind of everybody's choice, and whether you want to avoid foods from places like Vietnam or China, that's your choice. Mm-hmm. But when you don't even know the truth about, they don't have to put on there where it's from, now we don't have a choice. And overwhelmingly, customers want their foods to be labeled so that they can make their own decisions. And listen, if it's on there and you decide to eat it, that's your choice. But if it's not, if they don't even have to tell you where something comes from, they don't have to tell you if it's Chinese shrimp or Gulf shrimp. So they don't have to tell you if it's genetically modified, or they don't have to tell you where those ingredients came from.
Well, that would suck.
And that's what they're trying to do. So
let me tell you something. If I bought some crawfish and I got home and they were from China, because you can taste the difference. You can.
Right.
I would be very upset.
Right. And they don't have to.
Yeah.
So now you're saying the industry is trying to make this happen?
Absolutely. So if you want to buy fish raised in the USA, where we have higher restrictions on the use of banned antibiotics put in the fish's food, or let's say if you want to eat foods raised not in other countries with pesticides that the U.S. has deemed unsafe for human consumption, then you should be able to clearly read the label on these foods, and it will tell you where it came from and what is in it. That seems like to me to be in the best interest of the public. So, in other words,
who is trying to get rid of this
rule? The food industry as a whole. So if I decide I don't want to eat, or I don't want to feed my family rice raised in China where they use chemicals that have been banned in the U.S. as unsafe, then that should be my choice. But if they're able to pass laws that the food doesn't even have to say that it's imported from China, I'll never know the difference. And that's exactly what's going on in Washington right now. So most Americans just want the truth in labeling on their food. If you don't care where your food came from, then no harm. But if you do, you want to know that there's truth on what the labeling said. Now, unfortunately, the exact opposite is happening in Washington. There are several bills right now in Congress that would make it much harder to tell what you are really eating and where it really came from. And this is just sort of a terrible example of Washington doing what their big donors in the food industry want and ignoring what's best for the American people. And so these bills would prevent state and local governments from requiring genetically modified labels, removing the country of origins on meats and fish, and making it harder to know where pesticides are used, and some of them even in countries where we've banned those pesticides. So listen, the pesticides used in America are bad enough, but the pesticides they use in China and Vietnam and Thailand have many times been banned for use in the United States because they're dangerous. But there's nothing that says that if I buy something from China that was used with those chemicals, it can't be imported and eaten here.
Gotcha.
And they're trying to not even tell us that it's from China in the first place.
So sometimes it might say packaged in Oregon,
Right.
but that doesn't mean it came from Oregon.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, if you see a fish and it says product of Vietnam, like a lot of the tilapia does, or product of Thailand, you can bet that those fish were raised in very unhealthy, very disgusting ways. So if you say something that says product of the USA, you know that it has a little bit higher level of a cleanliness to it. But if something doesn't even have to tell you where it's from, and of course the food companies would love that because they can sell you really cheap products they got from China raised in really unhealthy ways, and they don't even have to tell you. So the food industry is spending an enormous amount of money to lobby for this legislation. Now listen to this. To the tune of over $100 million so far this year. So they've spent $100 million so far this year to lobby politicians to pass these laws to limit and not.
I would say to you politicians who may be listening, who have grandchildren, granddaughters, and grandsons and children, would you want because it's going to get in their bodies too. Would you really want to put that in your granddaughter's tummy? I just want to ask you that, politicians.
So the way this works is the big food companies like Kraft, Nabisco, Monsanto Seeds, General Mills, and so on have a guy that's a lobbyist in Washington, and he goes in and he sits down with your senator and he says, man, it's good to see you today. Listen, I brought you a check here to support your next campaign this year for $10 million. Would that be okay? Would you like that? And he goes, well, sure. And he goes, okay, great. Well, it was good seeing you. Oh, and by the way, there's this bill coming up next week on food labeling, and we want you to vote yes on that. Okay? Have a nice day. Now, what do you think's going to happen?
That's how it works, huh?
And then on to the next senator, and the next 10 million here, 10 million there, 7 million to this guy, 6 million to that guy. And guess what? What do you think's going to pass Congress whenever it comes out? What's in our favor or what's in the big food companies' favors? And so this goes on and on and on in Washington. Now, the food giant says putting these labels on food would send, quote, the wrong message about food safety, and it would cost customers more. I'm not sure what it would cost to put a little small label on something telling you where it's from.
Yeah.
I don't see how that could make it cost more. The truth is they just don't want to tell you where they're getting the ingredients because they buy cheap stuff from overseas and they want to make more profit. So I say this is basic transparency for Americans, and they're not worried about where their food comes from. Then that's their business. But why are they so worried about labeling where it comes from? To the tune of $100 million. They sound pretty concerned to me about being truthful about what they're putting in our food. So when we get back from break, I'm going to tell you, I'm actually going to name names. We're going to talk about the companies. Ooh. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think people will be very, very interested to see what actually companies are giving who what. So you're going to be astonished to see how far-reaching these efforts actually are. So when we get back, we're going to tell you some names of companies and what they're actually doing.
Hey, lunch is